just in the break, we're talking with the production crew, and just wondering how many females there are right now who've quietly just picked up a notepad and a pen in their sort of 40s, because they're thinking, okay, well, we're probably looking at turning me in for a sports model of about 21 in a few years' time. I better start making some notes here. We're talking about financial planning in marriage. In our studio with us is the technical head of department of the Financial Planning Institute, Alma Lebowski. Alma, what advice do you give people when they're looking at going into a marriage from a financial point of view? Let's look at the financials now. We've been sort of more legal about it. Yeah. Let's look at the financials.
Well, I mean, you know, you actually have to, so if before they're going into marriage, you'll have to, I think any advisor, be it an attorney or a financial planner that's maybe sitting with them, because both would, I mean, attorneys would know the exact legal implications, but financial planners will also have an understanding of the implications of different marriages. You know, it depends on, you know, what age they are, what assets they're coming into the marriage with. You know, I mean, obviously younger couples who are both still going to build their asset base, you know, they need to consider, you know, they might not have to exclude, because when we talk about an antenuptial contract, and I think ultimately, to be honest, I think the option is not in community. The option is, are you going to be out of community, and are you going to apply the accrual system, or are you going to just be totally separate, you know, and let your assets build totally separately. And I think that, and then with accrual, you also have the opportunity of say, excluding certain assets. So you may have inherited, you know, a great property down in Franschhoek, which is worth millions from your family, or, you know, things like that. You probably want to exclude that initially. So you come into the marriage with certain assets, and you exclude those. You may say, from here on, we're a couple, and we'll build together, and that's where the accrual is, as I said, a bit more fair, because you'll divide the difference between what you came in with, and divide that between two on divorce or in a death scenario. So it depends on the situation, Jeremy, in terms of, and that's why it's good to plan, because you come, you put everything on the table, you say, this is what we've got, this is what we want to achieve, this is our view on things, you know, because, you know, there are a lot of couples that say, look, we want everything to be separate, you know, although we love each other, like that, but we want to make sure everything is separate. And we'll build our assets separately.
So technically what you're saying is, you can, from a financial planning point of view, you can, if the two of you both sit down and talk your way through it, you can really put anything you want to in that contract.
Yes, as it is, it's a contract, and in South African law, we have freedom to contract unless it's against public morals or something criminal or indecent or something like that. So yes, that contract is quite wide. I mean, the person that does an antenuptial contract is known as a notary, and there's a special exam that attorneys do, which I haven't done myself. But as far as I understand it, it's a normal contract which is notarized, so it's actually registered at the deeds office, so that everyone knows you're married in that way. It's the same place that keeps title deeds for properties. So because it's an asset thing, it's kind of registered there. But it's a contract, and to the best of my knowledge, and you know, I stand under correction, but you can contract the way that you want in terms of your assets. You know, there's standard terms that you'll have to be in that contract, but the way you want to deal with your assets in terms of before you get married, and that's obviously important. You need to do this again, as we said, before you get married, because once you actually sign the marriage certificate,
that's it. If you haven't done it, you're then in community.
You're in community, and then you have to go to high court to actually sort that out.
Would you be able to, and you've already mentioned the emotional side of this coming into this contract.
It is marriage, after all.
Yeah, and women are so highly emotional, and I can see I'm going to be in trouble after this show. Would you be able to put in clauses about things like infidelity, for example?
That's a good question. I mean, I think so. Yeah, I mean, that you'd have to ask someone that's purely in practice that deals with this on a...
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you can understand two partners in a marriage, because of their work or their lifestyles, they grow apart. And as adults, they both decide, you know what, this is over. Let's just be honest with each other and let's go our separate ways.
Yeah.
That's one thing. But the other one is the partner who comes home and finds his wife. Everyone says finds her husband. Let's turn this one around.
Yeah.
He finds his wife in the sack with his best friend.
Yeah.
Why is it always the best friend? It's a very good question. Why is it always the best friend? I mean, in the UK, they always used to talk about, hey, she found him in the postman. You know what I mean? With the postman or the milkman. Yeah? But here in South Africa, it's always his best friend.
Yeah, I mean, just to get back to I don't think you'd have an infidelity clause in a South African scenario. I personally haven't seen it. So it's purely sort of asset-based, the contract. So what assets are in, what assets are out. I think infidelity may be something that comes up in the divorce proceeding. Because ultimately, even though you have a contract, at the end of the day, if it ends up in a nasty divorce, you're going to have certain issues in court.
If it's a contested divorce, you're going to be able to raise infidelity
as one of the things. So, I mean, let's talk about a scenario where you've been totally out of community. So wife they've decided in the beginning, maybe wrongly or rightly, that they're totally going to be separate. The wife may come and say, but for the last 2 years, I have actually been at home, and this hasn't been great for me in the affair. I'm just trying to think of a scenario.
Yeah.
She could maybe contest that and say, well, because of this infidelity, I'm actually want certain of your assets because of it, because so that would be I think, a divorce proceeding scenario, and those can obviously get quite nasty depending on the scenario.
What are the financial pitfalls of marriage?
Well, I think the first one is to make sure that you decide how you, as I said, this is an important topic, because before you actually take that step, you need to have the right discussions with advisors, attorneys, financial planners, etc., to decide, how do you actually want to do this.
But
so not doing it is one of the biggest pitfalls that I've seen.
But the only thing is that when you're, 22 years old, you're not thinking this way. If you're getting married later in life and you're in your 30s and you've got an established career, and the woman you're going to marry has also got her established career, you are thinking along these lines. But when you're 22 and you walk into, what was the place called? The Shack.
The Shack.
And you see Maralise and she goes, oh my goodness. You're not thinking that way.
No, I mean, I was obviously fortunate enough to have that education, but I mean, most people wouldn't have done a law course or something like that, so they wouldn't know. And I mean, I think it's a good point. So maybe from a government policy perspective, they may actually need to look at making sure that when you do get married and run off, that you're actually automatically out of community, because it is like that in some countries. I think the one example I can think of is Germany. Germany, the more sensible people,
of course,
they would. When you get married, as far as I understand, you're automatically out. So maybe that's something, that one needs to look at, because in community has a lot of implications. As we talked, the main one being that your husband could be off starting a business, signing sureties and things such as that, and you are actually financially implicated. And I mean, you signing the surety, I mean, we know that you often sign stuff that you don't know what your husband says, don't worry, this is all in order, just give me your signature so that we can have this business that's going to make us lots of money, which ends up making you lots of debt, and you're also in trouble. Do financial planners work through this emotional side of it with younger people? Well, if you're approached by this starry-eyed couple, and they both like, shua, like, all we want to do is like get married, oh man, like, nah, actually. Do you sit back and say to them, guys, you've got to understand what you're getting into here? Is there advice? Because I've always thought you should, before you're allowed to get married and before you're allowed to have children, you should actually have to sit down and write an exam. You should pass a marriage exam, and you should pass a childcare exam before you're actually allowed to fall pregnant. No, sure. I mean, You know, unfortunately, it's one of those things. I mean, professionals often seem inaccessible to a lot of people. So, you know, you immediately think, I must go see a lawyer because I want to get married. So you kind of know in the back of your head, but you're like worried it might be a bit expensive. You know, so that would be a barrier. So I think if they actually get in front of someone, I think it's definitely a professional's duty within their capacity, and if it's not within their capacity, to refer that person to someone and say, you know, these are some of the things you need to think about. And not to be too clinical about it, but be coaching about it and actually have some skills about, you know, these are the implications, these are things you need to think about.
I suppose it's also a role of the parent. Parents, you know, when the kid arrives and says, Dad, I'm thinking of getting married, that is where the parents should be stepping in and saying, do you understand the financial implications of this?
Yes, I think that's definitely a parental responsibility. And I mean, I think there are statistics that show when it comes to financial advice and big decisions, most people will go to a family member. And hopefully that family member, if they don't have the answers, will say, look, let's try and find these answers for you and let's help you. I mean, I think that's a big thing. I think parents need to realize that they need to teach their children some of these things. And I mean, we're talking about money and money sense. I mean, parents should be instilling these kind of things within their children from an early age. And I agree 100% with you on the exam for parents. But I might be biased because my mother is, in fact, a parent coach. So, so she also believes these things. And I've learned a lot from her as well in terms of instilling money sense within, you know, my children, I don't buy them toys. They do chores and they make money. And they make their own money and then they go and buy their toys that they want. So typical parents' big responsibility in helping their children in this situation.
Typical financial planner involves child slave labor as well. But we're out of time. But thank you very much for coming along and sharing your views with us.
Yeah, hopefully it's been useful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And just remember, if you walk into the shack in Cape Town and see a lady by the name of Maralise, first think about your financial planning. Okay. It's been great being with you. We'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
In 1884, almost 1,000 years after the first quill pen, Louis Waterman invented the first modern fountain pen. Waterman was an insurance broker in New York. One of his clients was about to sign on to a lucrative contract when the pen Waterman